What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the reveal of our number 6 team in my 2021 NFL Power Rankings, as we're going to take a deep dive into the Baltimore Ravens. Before we get started, a quick reminder, please do hit that like button down below. Really helps me out. Also, if you enjoy the video, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Lastly, if you're planning on buying tickets this upcoming season for college, NFL, even going to concerts, you name it, do it on SeatGeek, where you're going to get the best prices. It's a very user-friendly interface. It's where I buy all of my tickets, and you can also, the cherry on top, support this channel in the process by using promo code ThatFranchiseGuy. You'll save $20 on your first purchase. I encourage you guys to go check that out if you're buying tickets here coming up. But let's get into the Baltimore Ravens, who coming in here at number 6. It's nice. I feel like I no longer have to go so much against the grain with this Ravens team, as I would say over the last couple years, I've felt like Debbie Downer out here, just kind of course, acknowledging the great things they do and the floor that this team has with Lamar and this defense and the culture, but also pointing out some of the deficiencies in this team as far as the vertical passing game, let's face it, and on top of that, not letting the misdirection and the play action fool you, in that this is a very one-dimensional, one-trick pony of an offense. And now the narrative is kind of caught up with this team, and everyone's kind of asking, what's next for this team? What can they do to really open up the horizons of this offense and expand their ceiling to the point where they can more realistically compete with teams like the Chiefs in the AFC? And that's what we're going to do in this series. We're going to take a look at the moves they've made and the players on this roster and really ask, can they and do they want to evolve here? And it's going to be a really fun deep dive. But let's go ahead and start with this team's offseason. Really no surprise that one of the most well-run organizations in football had a great offseason. And as good teams do, they maximized on value and did a good job of addressing some of their biggest issues from last season. As you look at the key additions there, this team's pass protection last year was a problem. So they go out, and one of the first big moves of the entire offseason was getting Kevin Zeitler on a brilliant move that isn't going to impact their compensatory cap pick formula, as they lost Matthew Judon, who should return a mid-round pick for them. Because Zeitler was released and not a typical free agent, it's not going to impact those things. So just little stuff like that, maximizing on value that this front office does at such a high level, and they always have. But also getting Ronnie Stanley back from injury, who missed the second half of last season. Another brilliant move, kind of handling the Orlando Brown situation in a really nice way. They add Alejandro Villanueva after Orlando Brown requests a trade, wanting to go play left tackle. So honestly, maybe a push in pass protection there, just not quite the run blocker. But even on top of that, Villanueva up there in age, a sneaky move that actually isn't being shown here because he's not going to play this year, is adding Jawan James, who could be, if he can stay healthy, actually an upgrade to Orlando Brown, at least in pass protection long term. Again, a major caveat of staying healthy there. But just little stuff like that this team does so freaking well. The rest of the NFL, for the most part, should be pretty jealous of the consistency that this front office has brought to the table with stuff like that. And beyond that, they lose Yannick Ngakoue, they lose Matt Judon, but this team is just a factory for edge rushers. They draft Odafe Owe, as he's going by now, and Justin Houston. Again, maximizing on value, drafting a raw but freaky upside prospect in Owe, and then getting a veteran in Justin Houston, who just might be a better pass rusher than both Judon and Ngakoue. So just brilliant moves across the board. Some of the other stuff not mentioned, they get Tavon Young back. Hopefully, a guy that's played very little football in his career, but when he's out there, he's a very quality slot corner. And then also signing Sammy Watkins and drafting Rashad Bateman to hopefully improve a lot of the wide receiver woes that this team has had in Lamar Jackson's time here in Baltimore. Beyond that, just a couple other losses. Matt Skura, almost a liability at center on the way out, and Willie Snead a slot receiver that was eating up reps from some of their more explosive players. So very minimal departures and significant additions, maximizing on value, getting guys back healthy, and addressing their needs. So a fantastic offseason for the Ravens, and definitely a good cause for optimism as we head into 2021 here. But now it's time to get into the roster portion of the video, and that's going to start with Lamar Jackson and this quarterback room that is going to rank 7th in the league. And again here, it's nice to really not have to go so much against the grain with Lamar, because after 2019 and even into last year, I felt like just this constant Debbie Downer saying that it's ridiculous that all these people were comparing him to Patrick Mahomes and ranking him ahead of guys like Russ and Rodgers, when his ability as a passer is just so clearly a cut below those guys. And over the last year or so, that's really played out to the point that this ranking of 7th for Lamar is much more steady with where other people now put Lamar. So my stance on Lamar really hasn't changed all that much. I view him as a good passer, somewhere in the 12 to 16 range, and then the best running quarterback in the NFL now and maybe ever. But the difficult thing there is to quantify what that running ability brings to the table and how much that number 1 ranked running ability can then elevate him over simply better passers of the football. So it is a unique, complicated ranking. But at the end of the day, Lamar is a good passer of the football and ranks in that same group as a passer with guys like Cousins and Carr, and that he has very redeemable qualities as a passer. He is a great decision maker. He reads defenses. He attacks the ball with confidence and accuracy over the middle of the field. I love his release. He is exceptional in the quick game, which pairs very well with this play-action heavy offense that they have here. And, of course, his ability as a runner can add some really high-end scrambles in there. But just like guys like Carr and Cousins, there's very detailed issues and deficiencies in his ability as a passer as well. Honestly, my biggest thing with Lamar is he just isn't poised in the pocket. This has really been a big thing for me. Is you'll hear me so often on this channel talk about quarterbacks needing to know when and how to extend plays and use their feet, because obviously Lamar has the ability to do it, but it just doesn't feel the same as a lot of these other top quarterbacks. And again, we are comparing him at this point to the elite of the elite quarterbacks and what he does not do compared to guys like Russ and Rodgers and Mahomes. So with Lamar, it's almost like either he'll take off and run a little too fast and not know when to hang in there, or he'll almost be I don't even know, trying to prove people wrong in that he can hang in the pocket. And it's to the point where it's actually, that was a time that you should have taken off and run. So he just doesn't have that natural feel, that natural balance in the pocket. That's really my biggest thing with Lamar, and oftentimes does hold him back, especially when you get off script of that play action kind of gimmick offense that we talk so much about. But the other thing is the command of the deep ball, specifically outside of the numbers. It's a little strange. I don't know if it's something with his mechanics, just a confidence thing, but he's awesome attacking the middle of the field. Dig routes, posts, seam routes, just firing those hole shots, up the seam against cover 3, you name it. He is awesome between the numbers. But the second it gets to the sideline, he's one of the worst passers in the NFL. So that's another thing that just limits his ability as a passer when you compare him to the top guys. So that's how I feel about Lamar as a passer. And then you get into the running ability and how much does that elevate things. And that's a difficult balance and maybe a conversation for another day. But the nice thing, at least for a guy like me, is that, of course, you can debate this here and that there, but he's undoubtedly shown, even in his MVP season, that there are deficiencies in his ability as a passer. But the nice thing here is we very much move past that point. We're no longer trying to compare him to Patrick Mahomes. He's kind of classified in this different tier that I think he currently belongs. But now we can have a much more nuanced conversation about what he is now, which I hope we just kind of did, and also talk about where he could go and what he can do to elevate that passing ability moving forward. And that's the last thing I want to talk about here is there is still, of course, hope for him to develop. As I mentioned, there's a lot of redeemable traits there, and there's just some stuff that he can work on to really become, in my view, that elite level quarterback. And I mentioned it, it's the pocket presence and it's the deep ball accuracy, which is stuff that Lamar himself is going to work on and going to need to work on. But the team is also hoping that with better pass protection, better separation in some of these guys that they're bringing in, and just more sure-handed players that maybe can give Lamar a little bit more confidence to throw that deep ball, you're hoping those are things that just in the likes of a Josh Allen in Buffalo, that they did a fantastic job working on some of the very things that we talked about with that deep ball accuracy. You're hoping that you can see some of that growth in Lamar Jackson. So I'm very comfortable at this point saying what he is now, which is somewhere in the 7 to 11 range of NFL quarterbacks, depending on how you feel about what his ability as a runner brings to the table. But also saying that the Ravens are potentially doing some nice things here to get some continued growth from Lamar. And then we can talk about sort of the contract extension. There's no doubt that he's going to get paid here, and he absolutely should be. He offers a remarkable floor for this team, and if nothing else, if he doesn't develop some of the stuff as a passer, if nothing else, you're going to get a quarterback that you can build this style of offense around, sort of this gimmick, read option, play action, middle of the field, attacking passing game. You're going to have, worst case, the 16th best offense in the NFL, and then you hope that you do things defensively to get that elite defense, which, of course, that's a formula that can win a Super Bowl, absolutely. But as we know, it's just more difficult to lean on defense in the playoffs to string together wins and get a Super Bowl. It just requires more luck and health and all this stuff. So that's a formula that can still win, and he should absolutely be paid. But the question is, when you start paying him that $40+ million, Josh Allen just came in at $43 million. You have to typically be a Mahomes, a guy that can just elevate everything. And even then, we haven't really seen a quarterback get that much money and still be able to win a Super Bowl. So that's a conversation maybe for another day. I'm excited to watch Lamar this year. I think he's going to have a really fun season, and I think the 7th ranking is pretty fair. But let's now move on and talk about the rest of this roster and some of the other support that Lamar can get here, because it's not all about Lamar Jackson here. Though it is maybe worth noting before we move on that the backup situation here is not good. Tyler Huntley and Trace McSorley here, similar styles as very mobile, high-end athletes, but similarly to a much severe degree, just not great passers. And surely they don't offer the same floor that Lamar does. They can run the same offense, but you're going to get a significant downtick in production, just as we've seen with RG3 coming in last year. That was just brutal. But let's move on to the running back here. And this group's going to come in tied for 20th. I'm going to be honest, I think I'm at this point a little bit lower on J.K. Dobbins. Not that I don't think that he doesn't have the talent or can't get to be a really good back. I just don't think we've really seen that. He played at Ohio State that the Master Teagues of the world produce at a super high level. So that's not really impressive that he was ultra productive coming out of Ohio State, but he does have the traits to really elevate and all that stuff. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of hype and expectations for J.K. Dobbins. I've seen him in the top 10 running back conversation, and I just don't view him that way. He's a good, balanced, highly athletic running back, which is good enough to put him in that, starting caliber conversation. But I don't know if this is a hot take or not. I'm excited for Ravens fans to let me know. I actually don't think he's the best running back on this team, and I never thought I'd be a Gus Edwards truther, but I think Gus Edwards, especially in this scheme that you look at what they did with Mark Ingram back in 2019, his ability to go full steam ahead and almost guarantee that inside keeper on the read option was going to get you 6 yards or so. To me, Gus Edwards is a better runner for this team, at least on early downs, because Dobbins is a much better receiving threat. But if you want to talk about Lamar getting back to that elite read option running ability that he had in 2019, I think having a more of an inside threat and a guy that you do have to be a little more afraid of, like Mark Ingram in 2019. To me, that's Gus Edwards. So if you want to talk about fantasy football, I think he's way undervalued. They did just give Gus Edwards a contract extension. I think he's almost forgotten about because of all this hype around J.K. Dobbins. And it's not that I don't like J.K. Dobbins. I do, but I see this as much more of a split. And I actually think Gus Edwards is the better running back on this team. Now, we'll talk about receiving ability, and of course J.K. Dobbins will have a significant role here. But it's a nice 1-2 punch is kind of what I'm trying to get at here. I don't know if I'm doing a good job of that or not. But you have Justice Hill is the third back. He's fine. Hasn't really shown what I thought he might here, especially in the receiving game where I thought he was really fluid coming out. But as a third, he's got some upside, and then that's really it. I think McCrary is like 225 pounds, might be a decent Gus Edwards kind of practice squad stash. In the event of injury, he can step in and be the next Gus Edwards, who I believe was undrafted. But yeah, it's a good, solid running back room. You hope the run blocking is great. And of course, these guys, similarly to what we said about the Patriots with Cam Newton, the threat of the read option opens up so much for these guys to the point that they will very likely outproduce statistically the 20th ranked ranking. But in a vacuum, I don't think this is some amazing group of backs, but it's surely good enough. And let's move on to the receiving conversation. And here they're going to rank 23rd, which I've said this about a lot of teams here. It sounds low, but there's a ton of really good receiving cores in the NFL these days. It's one of the deeper position groups in the entire league at this point. So they are a very respectable 23rd here, ranking ahead of some other really good teams. They've done a lot to hopefully improve this group here, bringing in Sammy Watkins and Rashad Bateman. And honestly, I think moving on from Willie Snead to Devin Duvernay there in the slot, and Rashad Bateman, of course, is an upgrade in its own right. And again, I'll just reiterate one more time, the hope here is that this group can be much better from last year, where they were probably a bottom 3 group, and help Lamar develop and maybe help Greg Roman open up the offense a little bit more and not be such a one-dimensional, gimmick offense, really is what they've been. And I think they've done a good job here, bringing in a much more diversity of skill sets. So you add Sammy Watkins, who just good signing, 1-year deal, good value again. Now, I've seen some pretty high expectations out there on Ravens Twitter for Sammy Watkins, and I guess he looks really good in camp, which is great. We've heard that a million times. For me, with Sammy Watkins, smart move, gives you a much more just real possession perimeter player. He's obviously better than Miles Boykin and better than Marquise Brown as a full route tree type of possession receiver. But he is, to me, a number 2 guy and is just not what he was at the beginning of his career, whether it's injuries compounding or losing some of that motivation or whatever it is. He just isn't that dude that was the number 4 overall pick anymore. He's much more of just a balanced number 2, going to be the first installment of our jack of all trades, master of none here. So I get that Ravens fans are happy to have him, but I just don't honestly think he has a very big season. And it's really just a huge balance of a lot of different stuff why I say that. I don't think Greg Roman, to kind of allude to some stuff we'll talk about later, I don't think they completely evolved this offense. Roman kind of has always been what he is. And to have Sammy Watkins produce, you kind of need a more traditional, wide-open, modern passing game. I think there are some problems in Lamar's ability to fully utilize a guy like Sammy Watkins. And just Sammy Watkins himself, I just don't really believe in all that much. So, decent signing, little upgrade, but I will say, temper expectations a little bit there. Honestly, the guy I want to talk about here is Rashad Bateman. He's the guy I say, no, don't temper expectations, raise them, because this pick was one of the best fits, if not the best fit, as far as need, talent, value, scheme fit in the entire draft class. And I'm devastated that he got injured, and it's one of those injuries that we've seen, especially at this receiver position where, he'll be back middle of September, and then October hits, and it's like, oh, he's still recovering. He'll be back at the end of October. And then we get to November, and he's finally on the field, and he's still not fully healthy. It feels like one of those injuries. I pray to God I'm wrong, because I cannot wait to watch Rashad Bateman specifically in this offense. But that injury did kind of take some things off for me, and I really hope he can get healthy. But the scheme fit here is what I want to talk about, because Rashad Bateman's skill set it's Michael Thomas-esque. He's kind of this hybrid of Michael Thomas and Keenan Allen to me, because I think he's a better separator. He's faster, and I think has potential to have a better release package than Michael Thomas. And that's where some of the Keenan Allen comps come in. But he's not this burner of an athlete. He's certainly athletic enough and can contribute as a deep ball guy as well. But in this offense, because again, I think they stick to what they've done for the most part here. To be realistic here, Greg Roman is what he is. So if you're going to put a receiver in that offense who is going to attack the middle of the field with separation, run after catch, and contested catch ability, and be a perfect fit here with everything that they do at such a high level, it's Rashad Bateman. So I just have super high expectations when he can get on the field to be the focal point of this passing game. A huge reason Lamar Jackson can show some growth as a passer. Maybe not so much in the areas that he needs to work on, but at least having that crutch of middle of the field passing and efficiency at what they do at such a high level. I call it being a system fit. It's Rashad Bateman here. So what a great pick. And then you have Marquise Brown, who's your decoy, your deep threat, and a guy that you hope can be a little bit more consistent. And with the rest of this stuff falling into place, maybe he can continue to help Lamar elevating the deep ball accuracy, because there's really no reason Marquise Brown can't be a Deshaun Jackson caliber player here. It's just, I would say, be it the scheme, the type of offense they run, some of the inconsistencies from Marquise Brown himself, and Lamar's, frankly, inability as a deep ball passer. We just haven't seen that high-end deep ball ability from Marquise Brown, but when I watch him on tape, I see Brandon Cooks, I see Deshaun Jackson. So if and just like those players, when they get the right fit, they're super explosive deep threats. And I feel very similar about Marquise Brown. And then you got Devin Duvernay, who I loved this pick last year. He just hasn't got much of an opportunity. But again, a very good scheme fit, and the things that they could maybe do with him being on the field a little bit more. And we saw glimpses of it last year as far as all of the misdirection that they use. He can be your pre-snap motion guy and keep linebackers on their heels, slot corners on their heels, which just adds another element to all of the stuff that they do so well. So while it's fun to entertain the idea of them opening up this offense and letting Lamar have that big Josh Allen season as a passer, when I see this group, that's not the outlook I project. I think we see a very similar style offense with the misdirection, the heavy packages, attacking the middle of the field. And you hope some of that other stuff comes in time and maybe gets there, but that's just the outlook I'm painting for this year. They also have incredible depth. This might be the deepest receiving core in the NFL right now outside of Tampa Bay. Miles Boykin is not a starting caliber player, but to have him as your fifth now after all of these upgrades, outstanding. Great blocker, maybe can be a good special teamer for you. Tylan Wallace, I do think is a better receiver than Miles Boykin, just hasn't shown it at the next level. To get him in the third round was just another unbelievable pick, and I think Tylan Wallace is the second best deep threat on this team outside of Marquise Brown. Maybe Rashad Bateman, but his ball tracking ability and just ability to win vertically is insane. He's going to give Lamar more of a catch radius guy, is something we've talked about, is someone that he can trust to just put the ball up to on third down. He's going to need to earn that playing time and really show it at the next level. But he was one of my more underrated receivers in this draft class, and they got excellent value on him. And then I don't even know if they keep anybody else. Teams are going to keep an eye on Prochet and Kane because those guys can play. They just are a little buried here. So all of a sudden, a very deep group of receivers, but you're not getting any elite options there, at least not on paper. You do have Mark Andrews, who's one of the top tight ends in the NFL. He had that one kind of outlier season in 2019 as far as being an elite weapon. The other 2 years, he's been a very good tight end, a guy that can separate over the middle of the field and win some really tough catches, but the hands have been an issue, and he's not an elite athlete, an elite separator to the likes of a Waller or Kelsey or anything, but a very good player. The tight end depth, you've got Nick Boyle, you got Eric Tomlinson, kind of just blockers there. They trade for Josh Oliver. I thought it was a wasted pick by the Jags. I thought he was a late day 3 talent, just not a good football player, a decent athlete. Never saw it with him. Ravens better scouts than myself, so maybe they see something, but I'm not counting on it. Poljan's a better tight end to me. Just a guy that can win contested balls, decent blocker, big-bodied guy coming out of, was it Virginia Tech there for Poljan? So we'll see who makes the team there at the bottom of the depth chart. And then the running backs, for me, J.K. Dobbins is the third down back here. And I feel like I was trashing on J.K. Dobbins earlier. I don't want to do that because I do think as a receiving threat, that's where he's going to add the most value here in the screen game, ability to give a good check down option or a guy that can run routes out of the backfield for Lamar. So he's another good option here. Behind him, Gus Edwards, just not much of a receiving threat. Justice Hill was so good at catching the ball out of the backfield in college. You hope that he can, retrieve that ability from years past. It just hasn't really been there at a super high level, but I do think it's in there somewhere. So really just about J.K. Dobbins, honestly, from the receiving backs. But ranking 23rd in the receiving core, I think it's a fair ranking. Again, there's so many good receiving cores in the league that this sounds low, but it's an improved group that certainly has potential to exceed this ranking as well, barring other circumstances kind of elevating these guys, I would say. But now the offensive line, this is another group that struggled last year that they're hoping to be better this year. And obviously, just simply getting Ronnie Stanley back, who's probably the third best tackle in the NFL, getting him back healthy is just an automatic, easy upgrade there. But they did other stuff as well, bringing in Zeitler and Villanueva, kind of swapping him out for Orlando Brown, and then a draft pick as well in Ben Cleveland. So a lot of pieces to get through here. Not going to spend a lot of time on Stanley. He's a rock. He is what he is, athletic, technically sound, do-it-all, all-pro caliber tackle. Best tackle in the AFC for sure. Then you get... at right tackle, Alejandro Villanueva. So Orlando Brown kind of forces his way out of here, and you get Alejandro Villanueva in free agency, interdivision pickup there. Much different player from Orlando Brown. As far as Brown being a much better run blocker, but I never liked Brown's pass protection, honestly, and I have a lot of questions about his ability to be a franchise left tackle for the Chiefs, by the way. I like that trade for the Ravens. But Villanueva, a much more sound pass protector, just a longer, quicker player, and a more technically sound pass protector. So that's a nice nod towards helping the pass protection for Lamar. I actually think this is an upgrade in pass protection from Orlando Brown. Now, he's not as great of a scheme fit from all the run blocking stuff, but just a super, super move from the Ravens front office, honestly, to get picks for Orlando Brown, not have to overpay him, honestly, like I think the Chiefs will, and then get a veteran in Alejandro Villanueva to just plug right in there. And then we mentioned the Juwan James pickup, which is just a next level, 3D chess level move from the Ravens, just elite level operation to find a right tackle here for more of a long-term option. But then you slide inside and it's complicated. We list right now Ben Powers, Bozeman, and Zeitler. That's what the Ravens are preparing to start. This is kind of an open competition other than Zeitler at right guard, which was yet again 3D chess by the Ravens, not having that signing impact their compensatory pick. Plug him in at right guard. They had a huge hole, a void left by the retirement of Marshall Yanda, and you just plug in Zeitler, who's not Marshall Yanda, but he's a hell of a lot better than Tyree Phillips in the, frankly, garbage they were rolling out last year. That right guard spot was just a turnstile, having Lamar run for his life. So that's a huge upgrade right there. And then the center left guard kind of competition here. I do think Ben Powers probably is the week one starter, although I freaking love Ben Cleveland. Cleveland was my number 2 guard in this class, and I had him really kind of right behind Elijah Vera Tucker, and that was controversial, but this dude is a mauler in the run game. I do think as a pass protector, he's got a lot to work on. We've talked in the past about Georgia really not doing a good job with these players' pass protection technique, whether it was Andrew Thomas, Isaiah Wilson, Ben Cleveland. All these guys have noticeably poor technique coming out. And I think part of that is the style of offense they run at Georgia. So I think that's something to keep an eye on, is the development in Ben Cleveland's foot speed and ability to land his punches and handle pass protection on the inside. But as a run blocker, it's going to be very tempting for the Ravens to just throw him out there and let him kind of learn by trial and error as far as pass protection, because this dude is full speed ahead, an absolute mauler. Again, my number 2 guard in this class. So I do think he eventually becomes the guard here. I don't know if it's week 1, because Ben Powers is just a guy with more experience, started 10 games for them last year, and held up okay in pass protection and was a good pass protector at Oklahoma. So he's fine. I just think Cleveland is the guy with the ceiling there. And then you also have kind of a competition at center between Bradley Bozeman and Patrick McCarry. Bozeman started every game for this team last year, and he's shown some nice growth. And I actually put the green arrow up there next to Bradley Bozeman, which is me signaling I think they are a breakout candidate for this season. I believe in Bradley Bozeman. He's a tough dude with a ton of strength who has shown some growth in his career. And then you look at the Ravens, who have just been a factory at producing these guys. And they've kind of thrown all these darts at interior to see what sticks. And I think Bozeman is a guy that at center this year, after playing a lot more guard last year, is a breakout candidate. Still a lot of growth to do as a pass protector, but I think we start to see some of that this year. So, there's some question marks for sure. Villanueva was released by Pittsburgh for a reason. He's not what he used to be. Zeitler's been a lesser version of himself, but how much of that was the Giants? Bozeman has a lot of growth to do. You got to figure out who your left guard is. There's still a lot to figure out here before you call them an elite offensive line, but I think there's a ton of potential here. We didn't even talk about Patrick McCarry, who's just an excellent insurance plan here. Not the best pass protector, but a good run blocker who could play left guard or center. They signed Michael Schofield for veteran insurance. You have a Castillo Colon competing there at center for that job as well, who's actually played well when he's been in there. Andre Smith, veteran right tackle. Tyree Phillips, a mid-round pick last year that just really sucked last year. But they have all these guys here. I think this is going to be such a better offensive line than it was last year. You do need a lot of things to go right for this to be a top 10 dominant offensive line. But I don't think that's out of the realm of possibilities for this group either. So I'm really impressed with what they did with this offensive line and what they did with this receiving core to just fix their issues from last year and don't let Lamar have any excuses. Basically, what this is about. Again, if you want him to be an elite passer, which I don't even think he needs to be. I think he can utilize this offensive line and utilize the different receivers to a point where this can be a top 10 offense. And they don't even rank that far off of it for me. They just have a couple of things that need to be solved here that we've talked about, but they rank 14th offensively for me, 18th for offensive coaching, which is tough. I think a lot of the gimmick stuff that they do with the heavy packages and the play action and attacking the middle of the field with that threat of the run fake, I do think there's a real element to that being a unique asset that they bring to the table. We talk down on it so much, but it's a tough balance. There's parts of me that say I get why they just stick to that, hope you have this high floor offense, and then play great defense because it is a high floor deal. The issue with that is you're not repping other stuff. You're bringing in players that are catered to that scheme fit. And then when you get in certain game scripts, which is exactly what we've seen in the playoffs, where they have to play from behind or they face great defenses, often in the playoffs, that can actually answer all this crazy shit that they do, then it's like, what's next? What's the counterpunch? And Greg Roman, along with Lamar, along with the receivers, along with the offensive line, it's been a mess when they get off of that script. And I do believe that a big part of that is Greg Roman is a one-trick pony offensive coordinator. So how much does he evolve and how much does he want to evolve? That's the single biggest question for the Ravens for 2021. But let's go ahead and move on to this defense, starting with the run defense. And the Ravens are going to stop the run this year because that's what they do every year. They're going to rank 7th for me. And it's really across the board. This is really the Ravens' approach, is they're going to throw a ton of bodies at you and they're going to overwhelm you and keep these guys fresh as a part of a rotation. So you go across the board. Brandon Williams, solid nose tackle. Derek Wolfe, really outstanding 3-4 defensive end against the run. Calais Campbell, I still think better as an edge player in terms of run defense, but still solid. Pernell McPhee, probably going to be the early down edge there as part of a rotation. Beast. Tyus Bowser, super crafty defending the run. Then you get into the depth up front. Guys like Jalen Ferguson, super big-bodied, tough guy, who's going to definitely be playing physical when he's out there in limited reps. Houston and Oweh, probably to me more pass rush specialists. You go to the interior, Justin Madubuike getting that breakout badge next to him. In my opinion, I think an ascending player who was always going to take a little bit of time to get up to speed, but he did towards the end of last season in a year that was really tough for these interior defensive linemen. You can make a case he was the most impressive interior defensive lineman in last year's class, even up there with like a Derek Brown. Brown, probably a better future outlook, but you get the point. In this Ravens defense, he has a ton of upside. Justin Ellis, established veteran nose tackle. Broderick Washington, a guy that defended the run well back to his college days. So a ton of bodies here. Really no questions for me. No elite players up front, barring Campbell or Brandon Williams, returning to the glory days. Both guys well over 30 years old. But just very solid front. The linebackers, it's also not like exceptional. Patrick Queen, I just don't think is ever going to be an elite run defender, and that's fine. I think when you drafted him, you were totally cool with that. He's really light, and he plays ultra aggressive. You will get splash plays, and there might be fans that come at me for saying he's not going to be a great run defender because you see the highlights, and you're like, oh my God, he's incredible against the run. And then you dial up all 22, and it's like you got to wait every 5 to 7 plays before you see anything remotely good. Like he loses his gaps, he misses tackles, he's incredibly aggressive. He also doesn't have the size to thump. So I don't think that's ever going to be a part of his game, and that's fine. That's why you have LJ Fort next to him, who's just a solid, balanced veteran linebacker. That's why you draft Malik Harrison in the same class to hopefully be a nice 1-2 punch. You use those guys correctly. Harrison, a guy with much more size and consistency as a thumper, who's going to have to fight for that job with LJ Fort. So that's a nice compliment to Patrick Queen, who you hope becomes an elite cover linebacker. You got CJ Board, Alaka, Welch, just kind of classic Ravens veterans developing there. But I see this as a very good run defense and certainly going to be one of the best in the league because that's just what the Ravens do, and they have the bodies to get it done. Then we get to the pass rush. Now, this was an issue for this team last year. We talk all about this offense. But it's a team that really leans on those zero blitzes. They run zero blitz as much as anybody in the league, and they can do that because their coverage unit is so great. But as we saw against a team like the Chiefs, for example, certain teams are going to be able to account for those zero blitzes, whether it's a quarterback like Mahomes being able to beat them with amazing throws and mobility, or some teams maybe have the offensive line and the IQ to handle these crazy blitzes. So if you're not getting a pass rush from the scheme, do they have that counterpunch? Can they line up 4 and get after the quarterback? And that was an issue for this team last year. This year, I see a lot more talent in this group. So let's start with the interior. That is something that I would say is not a strength for this team from a pass rushing perspective. You do have Calais Campbell, who at 35 years old, to just assume he can get back to what he was a couple years ago as one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. It's a tough assumption. It's, I guess, possible, but at this point I see him as a pocket pusher, a guy that can rush the passer, is certainly a high-end number 2 guy, but not an elite pass rusher here. And by the way, they ranked 21st for pass rush this year, which is much better than they did last year. But Derek Wolfe next to him, more of a crafty run-defending veteran at this point, but I do think he gets the majority of interior pass rush reps, at least early on as they get more and more from Justin Madubuike, who is the player with the upside and intrigue on the interior here. I just like his all-around game. Good athlete, high-effort player, strong guy against the run, but also really high upside as a pass rusher to potentially develop there. So he's the guy I look at on the interior to maybe elevate this group outside of the bottom third in the league or so. Brandon Williams, more of just a nose tackle, along with Ellis. So to me, it's about Campbell and maybe Madubuike becoming a good duo, but that's tough to lean on for 2021. Then you look at the edge, and this group to me is also, I don't know if I would say guaranteed improved, but in a weird way, I like this group. So you have Tyus Bowser, who's going to be out there for pass rush downs. He led this team in pass rush snaps. last year, but a lot of that is early down work. I did just list him out there, though. He's going to be a huge part of a rotation with Justin Houston, who is still a good pass rusher, was at a time one of the best in the league. He's a good number 2, a 40 pressure, maybe 8 sack player. I expect a similar season here, and I like that they will be able to keep him fresh. Houston had to play a lot more run defense for the Colts because that edge group was so thin last year. Well, he can stay fresh here for the Ravens and maybe actually be a more efficient player despite, being a year older here for the Ravens. And a great scheme fit as well, getting back to that outside linebacker, stand-up edge that he dominated at for the Chiefs. And then you have Pernell McPhee, who we haven't even talked about all that much, but he's had a career resurgence here, returning to Baltimore after being a good player for the Bears and spending a year in Washington as well. But don't forget about Pernell McPhee. He was actually this team's most efficient pass rusher last year on a per-snap basis, ahead of Judon and ahead of Yannick Ngakoue. So he's a great option to have as a guy to rotate in there, is a good player against the run as well. And then, of course, Odafe Oweh, who I really see as a total project. I went as far as saying that he has as much work to do if you just converted him to tight end as he does as a pass rusher. He has no power. He has no technique. He is a 6'5", 6'6", insanely freaky athlete. They had him at effing punt gunner, guys. They had an edge rusher as a gunner on punts because he is that fast, which is just awesome, by the way. If I could pick a team for Odafe Oweh, if he had to go in the first round, because I did have a second-round grade on him, but one of the highest, actually the highest upside of any edge rusher in this class. If someone said, before the draft, where do you want to send Odafe Oweh so that he can reach his upside and become this outstanding, Hall of Fame caliber edge player that he has the physical potential to become? I would say Baltimore Ravens without hesitation. So outstanding landing spot. He is who they got through the whole Orlando Brown, Alejandro Villanueva, Juwan James tackle situation. So almost a free dart throw based on how they played that. So I have no qualms with taking a chance at edge because, McPhee, Houston, even Tyus Bowser, these aren't long-term options. They're Band-Aids. So to get an Oweh that hopefully can be that elite pass rusher, the best guy you've potentially had down the road since Terrell Suggs, I agree with the process there, absolutely. So a new pass rush here. I think they have more bodies, and they're going to be able to throw more at teams and see some slight boosts from this team from last year, but still ranking 21st. I think if you're just rushing 4, I don't think it's an elite group, but they have some guys that can win one-on-ones, and they will be schemed up appropriately. So it's not necessarily a question mark for me. I just don't see it as a true strength of this team from a traditional standpoint. Again, they will manufacture pressure, but that will be accounted for by our defensive coaching grade that we will get to in a little bit. So now we get to the linebackers. We've kind of covered these guys, but they rank 22nd on an individual basis here. A little bit more on Patrick Queen. We talked about what he is as a run defender, but as a cover player, there's so much potential there. This is one of the top athletes at the position in the entire league. And he's a guy that plays with instincts. He's aggressive, and that's why you see him get beat out there. He's a young player. It's an impossible position for a young player like Patrick Queen to step in, especially in a COVID season, and just be a stable cover player. But we saw the flashes. So you hope a full offseason, another year in the system, a guy with all of the traits and character in the world just continues to grow. And he's another guy that with Odafe Oweh, you get really excited about that upside down the road. But there were a lot of inconsistencies from Patrick Queen. When you dial up the All-22, he's out of position more often than he's in position. I would just leave it at that. But I have no true questions about him growing and becoming a great player. It's just when. When does that happen? And I don't know. You got LJ Fort, who's solid, master of none, jack of all trades type guy, who's just solid, good starter there to have as you hope Malik Harrison actually takes that job. We just don't know. I think LJ Fort just sees the game much better from a coverage perspective and is a little bit more disciplined as a run defender. So they might nod towards LJ Ford, at least early on in the year. But I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if Malik Harrison takes a big step up and wins that job in year 2. I thought he was a great pick last year. And the potential between Harrison and Queen to be an elite linebacking tandem someday, it's there. Harrison is athletic and a thumper and could be an excellent number 2 next to Patrick Queen if Queen continues to grow. Board, decent fourth backup, and then Alaka and Welch probably competing maybe even for just a practice squad there. We'll see how many linebackers they want to keep. But let's move on to the secondary here, which is the most redeemable position group on this entire team, probably outside of quarterback, where they're going to rank 5th. It's not without question marks. I think you look at slot corner and you look at safety and say, yeah, it's just okay. But the cornerback duo, is it the best in the league? It's certainly worthy of that conversation. I think you look at the Rams and the Dolphins and the Patriots. I think Humphrey and Peters is right there. Marlon Humphrey, to me, I feel pretty good saying he's the 3rd best corner in the NFL. I love his versatility. He is one of those matchup corners that can move around and cover a slot receiver, cover anyone on the outside. He's got speed. He's got technique. He has an elite trait as far as his ability to force fumbles. He has the best peanut punch since Charles Tillman. Dude forced 9 freaking fumbles last year, which is absurd. So love Marlon Humphrey. And then you got Marcus Peters next to him, an ideal number 2 corner. He is overly aggressive at times. He can give up his spot in zone coverage to risk making a play. And he's not an elite athlete in man coverage, but he's tough. He can press. His technique is good enough. So he's a very good man corner. He's just the ideal number 2 corner. When you have a Marlon Humphrey, to have a playmaker type like Marcus Peters next to him is about as good as you can ask for. You got Tavon Young in the slot, hopefully. The dude's played 2 seasons in the 5 years since he's been in the NFL. And when he's out there, he looks like, honestly, a borderline elite slot corner. Like, super limited sample size, but he's quick, he's tough, he plays the run, can go man coverage like they enjoy running a ton of here. So you hope he stays healthy. The injury last year was a little deflating because it's like, all right, is he ever going to really be out there for this team? Almost like Jason Verrett-esque. But you do have Jimmy Smith, who I know got hurt, but sounds like he avoided serious injury. And he is the ideal 4th corner because he can go slot, he can go outside. Not an elite athlete, but when they run all this cover 0, that's like 15% of the time, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's like triple the average. He just presses guys and can jam you off the ball. And by the time he's getting beat, the pass rush has hit home. So when he comes in for like dime packages, they just put Jimmy Smith on like the 3rd or 4th option, and he's going to be kind of perfect for that scenario. So great scheme fit still. They're very happy to have him. Anthony Averett here had to play a lot last year with some of the injuries they had, and looked like an ascending young corner, a guy with a ton of athleticism coming out of Alabama, getting coached by the Ravens. There's no reason he can't step into the slot and be a good starter or emerge as a potential long-term replacement for a guy like Marcus Peters. I think he's got a lot of upside. We just haven't seen a ton from him yet. And then Amon Marshall, a lengthy athletic prospect as well. It sounds like Brandon Stevens is converting to safety after being a corner at SMU, but another guy with athletic upside. And then Shaun Wade, I think, does make this team a high-effort special teamer and kind of a decent backup to that Jimmy Smith role as a 4th corner. He's physical. He will get in your face. He will make some plays on the ball. Just like Jimmy Smith at this stage in his career, he will get beat. He's not a high-end athlete. But in a spot where he can come in, provide depth, and just take on a 4th option in a receiving game when you're blitzing 6 guys, it's a good role for Shaun Wade and a good fit. Then you get to the safety group, and I'm not super high on this group of safeties. I'm curious where Ravens fans come in on this group. You'll have to let me know in the comments below. Deshaun Elliott's just a good free safety, not a high-end athlete, but a guy that's growing and could be due for a nice little contract extension this year. Maybe not even a little contract extension, maybe a sizable one. I think he's a good player. I'm not like super excited about him, but he's sound, doesn't give up his spot a ton, just maybe not the biggest playmaker. And then Chuck Clark is a very solid, strong safety and maybe even a little underrated, but he's just not a high-end cover player, but a physical player, good, strong safety, can get in your face as well. So it's a decent safety duo. It's far from the worst in the league, but it's a group that I would say I'm just not all that excited about. I think there's room for some more upside there. You've got Anthony Levine coming back healthy this year. They like him a ton as that kind of third matchup, kind of bandit linebacker type. I don't know how much he sees the field. They were almost exclusively two safeties full-time last year. Elliott and Clark stayed healthy, and almost nobody else played in that safety room. You got Richards. Not even sure he makes the team. Just a veteran there, special teamer for sure. Brandon Stevens is an uber athlete. He's the guy in the safety group with a ton of upside. It sounds like he's playing safety, but just a project, really, is what he is. I don't see him making the field this year, but should make the team. Geno Stone and Ardarius Washington are interesting because they were, two of the smartest safeties to come out in the last couple of years, but both guys that fell 7th round for Stone and undrafted for Washington because they're just not great athletes. They're not the biggest players, especially in Ardarius Washington's case, and certainly not the fastest players. These guys are both players with 4.6 speed. But in the case of Deshaun Elliott, that's worked out for this team, is having just smart players back there. So it sounds like Stone's having a nice camp. Washington, I haven't heard much about, but was just a really instinctive, quick, athletic player. Maybe could be a slot corner for them as well if Tavon Young can't stay healthy. So a very nice undrafted pickup there. A lot of excitement around Ardarius Washington, who was a really good college player, but honestly, just at his size and with legit like 4.6 speed, it's just tough for these NFL teams. And these coaches like guys that have the traits that they can coach up, especially later in the draft. Not so much a guy like Washington where it's like he is what he is, super instinctive player, but the upside just maybe not so much there. So I don't see the safeties as a liability for this group, but there's just not a ton of upside there either, which I would say drops this secondary from top 3 to like 5th, because the corner group is in the conversation for the best in the NFL. But it is a group that's going to contribute to a top 10 defense in my opinion. Obviously, the secondary being 5th is a big part of that. That secondary is very important. But they also rank 4th for defensive coaching, and that's very notable for this team because, the pass rush was only 21st, but that's where that defensive coaching grade really shines through because they will manufacture pass rush. So I think that shows kind of how the formula works out in that sense, really accounting for how they scheme this thing up in a great way. It's one of the best schemed defenses. Don Wink Martindale, I don't know if he'll ever get that head coach offer, but certainly worthy of it. One of the premium defensive minds in the NFL. They develop talent at a high level. They have the tied for 7th ranked home field. Getting that crowd back, I think will play well for this team. There's maybe some drops in talent as far as traditional edge rush and, linebacker, maybe not quite there yet. The safety group, there's some spots that you can point to and say that's not elite. But for the most part, this should be a very sound, aggressive, in-your-face defense that's going to be a handful for most teams in the league. And then you got to mention the special teams. I mean, Harbaugh was here because he was an elite special teams coach, and they've done nothing but be one of the best special teams year after year after year. No different here. They have the best kicker-punter duo by far. They've got options to return kicks and guys like Duvernay. And then their coverage unit, these guys play at a super high effort level and they have depth. So they are the best special teams in the NFL. You just don't have to worry about that with the Ravens like you do most other teams. And then the culture is, to me, elite. They actually rank 2nd in culture. If you want to talk about player development and earning the benefit of the doubt, the Ravens have been the poster child of that for a long time here, and especially over the last few years. So that's all going to help out this team. But nobody questions the floor here, right? 14th offense, 8th defense. That sounds pretty par for the course for this Ravens team. To me, it's just about elevation and getting a few more spots to step up, especially on offense, to the point where they can get into that Super Bowl conversation. I hope we kind of covered who some of those pieces might be. Bateman, Lamar, I think Greg Roman adapting as an offensive coordinator. Those are going to be the big pieces offensively, because defensively, I think they kind of are what they are. They're going to be an aggressive defense, great coverage unit, a top 8 or so group, probably not an elite defense. Wouldn't stun me if they finish as number 1, but it's not like, the 2019 Bears or the 2017 Jags or any of those elite, talented defenses. More of just a strong, well-coordinated, aggressive defense. But anyway, let's recap the strengths and weaknesses of this team one last time, and then we'll get into the schedule and my ultimate prediction for this team. I think we've covered the strengths of the offense pretty soundly. They have an offensive identity. Whether or not they get off of that and try to improve their ceiling by expanding the breadth of this offense a little bit, it's worth conversation. But for the most part, they know what they want to do. They do it at a very high level, and that's more than a lot of teams can say. Part of that is the run game and attacking the middle of the field off of play action and all that stuff. So that's a true strength of this team. And then defensively, very in your face. Their secondary is outstanding, and defensive coaching is at a super high level, along with special teams. Honestly, the only weakness for this team is proving that they aren't a one-trick pony, which we've talked so much about, and expanding and elevating their really, ceiling here to compete with some of the best teams in the league. So it's a weakness relative to maybe the next 5 teams that we're going to preview here, but relative to the rest of the league, it's almost not even fair. But that's really the thing with the Ravens, is consistently beating those great teams, because they are going to beat down on the teams that are clearly worse than them. That's really shown the last few years, because they have all these strengths and they do so many things so well. But now the schedule here, and for now I have them coming in at a surprising 13-4 record, and a big part of that is the ease of this schedule. And I think this team gets off to a super fast start and gains a lot of hype, as their road games for the first 2/3 of this season are kind of a cakewalk. At Las Vegas, at Detroit, at Denver, at Miami, at Chicago. They should be favored in all of those games. And then we know this team is going to be favored at home against pretty much anybody. The real kicker there is I do have them beating Kansas City week 2. I think this is the year they get Kansas City. I think they can attack that defense in ways that they haven't in years past, and can maybe pull out a tight one. That's a big swing game right there. But for the most part, I think they start very fast. But down the stretch, I do have them losing 4 out of 6. I think their hardest games and their hardest stretch comes in the last 6 weeks of the schedule. At Pittsburgh, at Cleveland, tough road games. I do have them beating Green Bay at home, but certainly not easy. At Cincinnati, I have as a loss, so call that a split right there with the Green Bay win. And then the Rams at home, I have them losing, and then beating Pittsburgh at home, probably a split there as well. So a really tough end to their schedule, and a situation where they might be losing momentum heading into the playoffs. But Vegas agrees, and the market agrees, because their over-under is 10.5 wins, and betting the over there pays almost nothing at -140. So people are onto it, that this is a very favorable schedule for the Ravens, and I do have them coming out at 13-4. Now that's their ceiling here. I don't see them going too much higher than that, but if you want to talk about Super Bowl, if you want my honest opinion, I'm not betting them at 11-1. I am just maybe a little more skeptical about Greg Roman and the style of offense they run, and Lamar Jackson paired with a defense that should be really good, but again, not like super elite. I'm just personally not betting it. I could see them winning the Super Bowl, absolutely, especially with the record playing out like this. Like, that could get them the 1 seed in the AFC, which is huge. You get that bye, you get home field advantage, all that. So it's not that they can't win the Super Bowl. It's just not a bet I'm personally making. If you're more optimistic about Lamar and his ability to develop, and Greg Roman maybe growing a little bit as a play caller, then sure. Like, I'm not going to tell you not to bet the Ravens necessarily. It's just not one of my favorite Super Bowl bets. I think 11-1. If they play the season 11 times, do I think the Ravens win it more than once? No, I don't. So that's my deep dive into the Baltimore Ravens. I really hope you guys enjoyed, and do let me know in the comments down below what you think of this ranking and the breakdown of the team. We'll see you in a few days for our number 5 team. The countdown continues. I will hint and tease that I have one really surprising ranking still to come. So we have that to look forward to. Please do hit that like button if you enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and cheers until next time.